Spoilers ahead! You will find a few spoilers that reach into Season 3, but they are typically mild or tangential to the main plot. Other than that, if you like the video ahead, please consider checking out some of my books. For now, let's get back to the video at hand. Ain't cheese and milk and eggs such lovely things? I'll be perfectly honest, even though I don't do the whole eating animals thing, I do love cheese. It's the hardest thing to kick of them all. Or at least for me personally, but dairy and eggs are used to make some great things, and we often seem to have this weird view that these products are more ethical than meat, which is incorrect. Sure, the non-human animals are not killed for these products, although they are generally eventually slaughtered, but even though they are not killed, they are imprisoned, so not all that fun for those involved. But how do these sorts of things work in Beastars? Beastars has been the name of the game for each of these recent little videos that I've been doing, and that will continue here. This video, like all the others, is something of a rewrite of parts of my dissertation, which was about this manga too. If you want something much more academic, you can read that instead, but for everyone else, here's a more informal and much less dry version of some of those arguments. In the world of Beastars, there are herbivores and carnivores who live together in a society, and while the carnivores have historically consumed meat, they do not technically have to do so. However, it is implied that eating certain animal products is necessary for their survival. And these are things like milk and eggs. There is also insect protein, but we're not going to get into that today. These types of animal products are depicted in this world as more benign and consensually given, unlike meat, which is taken by force. The only real way to explain this is to go over how they are shown in the manga/anime. Eggs are shown first. There is a character named Legum, and she is shown to be a hard-working chicken who wants to produce the best possible eggs. It's a signifier of her pride, and she goes to great lengths to be as fit and healthy as possible to produce these eggs. She knows that Legacy happens to buy her eggs the day that they are on sale, and she watches his reaction to gauge how proud she should be. Ultimately, he loves her eggs, but he has no idea who is supplying them, and she continues on in blissful pride because of this. Legum sells her eggs. There is an inherent capitalistic aspect there. However, it is shown as a side venture. This is not her primary job, and she instead takes great pride in it rather than desiring the monetary reward that comes as a result of it. This is the main thing to keep in mind when it comes to her particular depiction of eggs. So, she has done this as more of a side project. Cool, that's fine. Let's move on for now. We'll come back to this. The depiction of milk is a little different. As with the eggs, we can see that certain animals in this world are simply able to produce what others cannot. Chickens can lay eggs and cows can produce milk. However, the cows that we are shown are not those who do this as a side gig. Instead, it is their full-time job. They are depicted as older cows who are financially struggling. They are working-class characters, and they are abused by the carnival managers who run the dairy factory. All of a sudden, it isn't some nice little side gig that a character has, but an indication of a systemic capitalistic issue in society that is deeply abusive and manipulative toward those who are trapped within it. In addition to indicating a class dynamic, as these cows are poorer and cannot afford to work elsewhere, and they may also be so-called unskilled workers and so have no other non-dairy based workplaces that would accept them, they are also all female. There is a gendered component to this too. All of a sudden this becomes a lot more human, doesn't it? People's bodies and labor are being exploited, especially female bodies, and the solution presented in the narrative is an atrocious one. Want to know how this issue is resolved in the narrative? Well, a character who is basically like a superhero cop just gives the managers money so that they can improve the factory and demand less of the cows. It does not solve the systemic issue inherent in the situation, it just pays off the abusers and acts like all is fine now. How very real of this manga. Solution that helps no one at all. Now, these are the only depictions of the production of eggs and milk that we are shown in the story, but we can probably assume that once characters have left school, egg production will be similar to this kind of milk production. It will not be a side gig, it will be an exploitative factory experience in which female animals are the most abused by the system, just like with real animals. We can extrapolate from these small examples that cows and chickens are probably being exploited en masse in this society, right? There is definitely a Marxist analysis to be had here, but the text itself does not really show us enough of the rest of the world's class situation to really allow for that. For instance, Legacy eventually works as a delivery guy, and while he lives in a small apartment, he isn't shown to be particularly struggling with it all. But Beastars isn't about class dynamics, so we simply don't get this kind of information. That's fine. We can still work with what we have here. Let's get back to the actual title of this video. Are eggs and milk then consensual animal products? They are given over consensually. No one is holding a gun to their heads and forcing them. However, if you have no prospects other than to sell what your body produces, you have been screwed over by the system at large, haven't you? If you have nowhere else to go and you need to sell your body to be able to pay rent, doesn't that mean that society has failed you rather than you having failed? Some will agree, and some will disagree, and it probably has to do with where you wind up on the political compass. I, however, as a lefty boy, think that those who are exploited by a system are the victims of that system. So let me ask again, are these goods given consensually? We already know that meat is not given consensually in this world. People are literally consumed, sometimes being viciously killed, other times simply being eaten after they have naturally died. We can all agree that meat is not given consensually, neither in this narrative nor in the real world, but eggs and milk are different. They're handed over without violence, it's fine. If you're forced to sell your eggs because you need to pay rent, you are definitely still doing that because of your free will, right? You are still free. You are still giving this in a consensual capacity, right? I think I have hammered on about this point enough. You obviously know where I stand in terms of this, but let's just add one last little thing. Cows and chickens have the opportunity to sell what their bodies naturally produce. But what about other animals who may be similarly poor but cannot sell what their bodies produce? What about a deer or a mouse? They can't sell their eggs or their milk, so do they just get to be poorer? It's a fundamentally unequal society that is depicted in Beastars, isn't it? Just like the real world, huh? But different. And in terms of this fictional world, all of this is taken for granted. We, as human outsiders, may see this as weird and wrong, but within their world, it is normal. In fact, while much of the narrative is concerned with how meat is wrong, the same focus is never aimed at milk or eggs. The author, Itagaki Paru, may not have even realized that these kinds of arguments could be made with regard to milk and eggs, because meat is really obvious, but for those who don't pay attention to this kind of stuff and simply treat it all as food, you may not realize that these non-death-based animal products are still morally wrong. However, I think that the best thing to do would be to simply throw a spanner in the works. We know about milk and eggs, whatever. What about a fertilized egg? Well, there is a small side narrative in which Bill the tiger cracks open an egg to find a live chick inside. Do you eat it? No one will know. Before he can eat it, some others see him with it, and they instead decide to raise it until it's old enough to be handed over to the authorities. Lovely stuff. However, doesn't this also make egg farming even more of a problem? In the real world, fertilized eggs are not exactly common, but if they are possible in this fictional world, then how many baby eaters are there? Sure, a fertilized egg will not generally have a fully formed chick in it, but the one Bill finds is old enough to be raised outside of an egg until it is strong enough. Isn't that kinda iffy? You may be fine with milk and eggs, but are you fine with eating babies? How does that really differ from just eating meat? I have pointed this little thing out before, but in the real world there are certain carnivores known as hyper or obligate carnivores. They must eat meat or they'll die. Domestic cats, for instance. However, in the world of Beastars, this biological aspect is not mentioned, and there are plenty of carnivores who never go to the black market. So, that means that the consumption of meat is not necessary. Is the consumption of milk and eggs definitely necessary then? In this world, the animals are basically standards for humans to a degree, and so while there are certain animal biological realities, there are also many that are ignored or changed. This means that the kind of veganism that characters like Legacy embrace is essentially the correct path to take. He does still consume milk and eggs, to my knowledge, but we don't have true confirmation on how important those things actually are for a carnivore to biologically function. So basically, the vegan option is the correct one, and that means that yes, this has been vegan propaganda all along. I tricked you. Anyway, now that that's over, we can do the things like the liking and the subscribing and the commenting to tell me that my name is silly. You can also check out my books. For this video, I think I'll recommend Parked In, seeing as it's about a sentient parking space in a mall who has a lot of questions for society, and we were just questioning society. See, I have tenuous links here. Well, whatever. Have a great day/week/month ahead.